Let's see. All right, I think we're live. All right, YouTube, AAA back here once again with another recurring guest, Duff. Duff, go ahead and say hi.
Hi, everyone.
So, hope everyone had a great week. It's been a little bit, and so much has happened, and all that fun stuff. Obviously, as you can tell from the title, we are here to discuss the things that have just happened with the Trump speech at the State of the Union 2018, technically the second one that he has had. And overall, if you liked it or hated it, I just wanted to go and talk about that. So, I just wanted to say that I don't actually like enjoy watching things live unless they're really short. So I enjoy fast forwarding through boring parts as I see them. So I actually haven't seen the whole thing all the way through. I probably will eventually, but I did see the highlights of it, and I think I heard on the Ben Shapiro show that it was one of the longest speeches that had or one of the longest State of the Union addresses that had ever been given. So I guess there's that. I'm kind of glad I didn't see the whole thing if that's going to be how it was, but it did. From what I had seen and heard, it sounded like the address that he gave was very positive, very well liked. He hit on a lot of points that people wanted him to, and very much agreed with. So good on Trump for trying to be as uniting as possible. It sounded like he did a good job with the common concerns, and at the same time, it was interesting to see the Democrats' reaction, or I guess lack thereof, for even their own party points being hit, and they still were disagreeing with everything he had to say. So that was interesting to see, and I guess we'll find out how things roll out this year when we have the elections for those positions. But yeah, so I mean, no, it was pretty good overall, and I think hopefully, we see Trump do all the good stuff that he has said he would do, and continue to see America and our allies do as well do as well. So anyway, Duff, any thoughts for you?
Yeah, it definitely was long, but I would say this is an example of Trump actually kind of getting into the role of being presidential, of being able to be an orator in front of an audience, and in fact, in front of a hostile audience, because not many Democrats were willing to clap, and not many of them were willing to stand at any point either. And I'm a bit curious about that because I honestly don't remember Obama's last couple State of the Union addresses. I don't know what the Republicans were doing there, so I don't want to be pot calling kettle black here, because it could very well be that just in today's media environment, you want to make as many statements as you can, so you make a habit of not standing for your political leader. But definitely a optimistic speech. Trump hitting on the highlights of his presidency so far, particularly in terms of economy, in terms of job growth, in terms of military success overseas. But he also did a good job of either directly or indirectly attacking the idea of identity politics and the victimization lottery, and that should be celebrated, as opposed to celebrating America as a nation and American values on the whole. But what are some of your thoughts there, Triple?
Yeah, I agree. I think it was a good, again, overall kind of pep talk on the word. I think it was a great way to unify and say, hey, here's what we're striving for. Here's the dream. Here's the core goals that we all have. And, I think that one of the best things he said about, and again, I'm paraphrasing, I don't remember the exact quote, but I really enjoyed his comment towards, if you live in America right now, it's a great time to live, great time to be prosperous, great time to fulfill your dream. We are all here together for the same reason, and we need to work together to make this world a better place, basically, which, again, I don't think that there's anyone living in America who is really against the whole, you need to be the best you possible. Here is the opportunity to do so, and just it's up to you. You have all the ability, so don't squander it. And it's up to you, which is really cool to do. So I mean, I hope he keeps this up. I hope that everyone kind of thinks, but hey, media says this and that, and they'll just, oh, Trump said this and it's the worst and all that kind of stuff. And hopefully now, we can all say, hey, you know what? Maybe everything Trump said is not great, but at least policy wise and action wise, and what really matters has shown that it's not nearly as this apocalyptic end of the world, people dying in the streets, as we've been told by the media for what, a year now, basically. And I mean, I even was told online that there have been a few polls during and after the speech where everyone was basically, yeah, we agree, we think that America is not so bad, and we're not all these horrible things that the Democrats and the media say we are. So hopefully, this is a change in tune, and eventually we'll get some more less radical people from either side to join the conversation, and maybe this is a good conversational opener, and we can actually start to heal and at least, I don't know, make a deal, because as we've seen now, I think one of the Trump's bigger points was, hey, I'm going to give you a great immigration deal, take it, and the Dems were still saying no, and I'm like, wait, he gave you what you wanted and more, and for pretty fair price, and we're still saying no. So I think it's blatantly clear to see their actual interest or disinterest in America. And I don't know, what do you think? If you're a Democrat right now, what do you think? Like, I guess let me rephrase. If you're a Democrat right now, Duff, do you think that there is a good way to kind of get around this, or have they kind of really screwed themselves over?
Um, hard to say, because I think the leadership of the Democratic Party right now appears to be trying to force most of the members of the party into a certain type of conformity. A good example of this would be when, who's the head of the Democratic Party in the Senate right now?
Um,
Sorry?
I'm trying to think of the name.
Yeah. Anyhow, one of his fellow Democrats started clapping, lightly, and he gave him a stink eye, just like, how dare you clap? And they're trying to present a unified front, but I think in doing that, you're actually going to start to fracture your base within both houses, because in the American system, the parties are not to be whipped in the same way as they are here in Canada and in the British tradition. So under British tradition, if you need a vote to be passed through, you literally send out your party whip, and you get enough people in there to get the vote through. And you can pretty much guarantee that everyone in your party will vote the way you want. So individual parties don't necessarily have like a Freedom Caucus or a GOP or whatever within the party, whereas in the States, you have these larger party groups and then minor party groups within them. And the more you try and force the minor party groups to sort of fall in line with the current leadership, the more you're going to make them resent the current leadership. So I bet you a lot of Democrats are kind of sitting there and going, well, I'm actually more centrist than where my party's going. Maybe, just maybe, it will be worth talking across party lines. And I don't really like being silenced the way that I am now. So maybe, just maybe, we can start having a dialogue with other like-minded people and create, let's say, a new faction within the Democratic Party. But that might be going a little bit too far too fast. Mostly speculation on my part. But what I did find interesting is, so the State of the Union address is essentially a tableau. The president, and many presidents since Reagan have kind of done this, will try and create a stage upon which they see and want people to see what America is like under them. And the people that Trump pulled on, like Peter Sharp, who's a 12-year-old guy, apparently from Redding, California, who put flags on veterans' graves, is an appeal to nationalism, but a nationalism that says America is worth fighting for as it is now. Whereas traditionally, under the Obama administration, they would say that America is a terrible cesspit and we need to fight for the America that's going to replace it. And that's a pretty major statement to make, saying like, look, America might have problems, but we need to remember those people who fought for it because it's worth fighting for. In the same way, there was a North Korean defector who he brought in. I'm going to see if I can grab his name.
Something.
Trump honors North Korean defector. Sorry, go ahead there, AAA.
I said his name Sung something, I want to say. I can't remember the full name.
Yeah, I can't find it quickly either. But here we have somebody who literally escaped an extremely oppressive, and in his case, physically oppressive regime. Apparently, North Korean military essentially put his arm on a train track and waited for a train to run it over, kind of thing. And he now serves as a coordinator and a facilitator for other people who are escaping from North Korea to what is a better system and a better way of doing things, which is representative of, the American capitalist system, but also those values which are embedded in the American Constitution. We hold these freedoms to be self-evident, but we do not appreciate a dictator telling us that we live in a perfect society when he gets to eat and we don't, kind of
Right.
thing. So he's very much tried to use the State of the Union address to call out a lot of the negativity that the Democratic Party has been doubling down on in the hopes of saying America is terrible. Maybe nation states shouldn't exist, and maybe a character or a national character within a country is a bad thing without question. And I think he did a fairly effective job of attacking all of those particular points.
That's true. That's true. Did you see? And I think that the reaction was crazy too, because all the Democrats basically said, "Oh, this is the worst speech ever. It's totally violent, totally anti-American. Why would you, cast all these people out and whatever else?" Did you see any of the reactions, such as the one from oh crap, can't think of her name now. I'll go with did you see Joe Kennedy's reaction?
Yeah, so his was essentially calling out Trump's speech for being too self-aggrandizing, marginalizing, and also, let's say, nationalistic and imperialistic in a aggressive way that could lead to future racial tensions as well as possible war with places like North Korea. So yeah, that was interesting. Just because I'm not sure he actually addressed any particular part of the speech, but rather was reconstruing what he thought he heard in the speech. So his perception, I'd say, was somewhat colored in terms of what he was saying versus what he had heard.
Yeah, it was a little crazy to see the. I don't know. Actually, I've been heard. I was listening to the radio with Dennis Prager, and he commented on the speech and talked about the first few minutes of it were just kind of like, "We are here in Massachusetts, and we are uh, a state founded by immigrants." And we're like, "Okay, we believe in that everyone has self worth, and you should all be able to live freely and da 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 da." And we are against all the bigotry and all these whatever transphobic and all these racist. When you name it, they were against that stuff. And I was like, okay, great. And then they just out of nowhere just had this. Well, we've seen the detriments of capitalism and all of these leaders trying to destroy the American way. And I just want to make sure you all know if you make a wall, then my generation will tear it down and all this other nonsense. Like, all right, did we watch the same speech, and B, how it's always interesting to hear the apocalyptic talk of the Democrats, and yet no, I appreciated that Trump could say, "Hey, I don't like this quote unquote policy with immigration, or whatever," and say, "Hey, here's someone who has suffered through the negligence and has an issue with a policy we've made. Here is the end result. That again, not every end result happens this way, but here's one where an MS-13 or other violent immigrant came over and they killed, hurt someone, and here's the family member there," as opposed to Democrats saying, "Hey, the world's on fire," and we're all like, "Where? What?" So I guess is that kind of what you took from his reaction?
Well, so there's a couple things here. So when we come to the wall, you build a wall, we'll tear it down. I would say either intentionally or unintentionally, that's a reference to the Berlin Wall, which separated, of course, East and West Germany, and East and West, sorry, no, East and West Berlin. And where he is trying to make a false analogy is saying, you'll build a wall to keep out people and we will tear it down. And it's like, well, actually, as much as the Berlin Wall was built to keep, it was built to keep ideas out, not necessarily people, because it was the USSR which was penalizing people for trying to hop the wall, not the North Americans and not the Allied forces. So it's a bad analogy because essentially what he's saying is you're building this wall to keep to keep people out. And it's like, well, no, we're building this wall to keep illegal migrants out. We have no particular issue with their ideological bent or the idea that they think America is a better place to be. Rather, we want to make sure that if you come into our country, we know a little bit about you. And that's a very different stance to take than what he was alluding to. And in the same way, when he was talking about smearing all immigrants by saying, whatever 13, the gang from Mexico, was active within the States, well, you can't really have a leg to stand on there. Now, I will agree that Trump, in using that example, was using a singular instance to try and make some sort of broad statement about a whole, that is all immigration. But I don't think what he was saying was that all immigrants are members of gangs, but rather, if we allow people to come across the border and we don't vet them, you can actually bring in gang violence because you didn't know that that person could have been affiliated or had a family which was attacked by that particular gang. And if you want to be merciful about it, you could say, actually, we let them in and we knew that they had a hit out on them from this gang. So we actually had people observing their house to prevent this from happening. So essentially, he's conflating why you want to control immigration with Trump saying that you want to keep everybody out, because that's not what Trump said at all. In fact, he said with the the DACA thing, he was willing to legalize a whole bunch of people who are already here to a degree which the Democrats weren't even willing to do. So there's a lot of faulty causality being thrown at Trump here. But at the same time, if you don't do that, you can't really continue forward with your arguments, because of course the Democrats think they have a better way of doing things, and if they didn't, there'd be no reason for them to be in power, be a party or be trying to be a political entity unto themselves. So you kind of got to take it as it comes, but you got to call the BS when you see it. But what are your thoughts on that, AAA?
That's fair. Well, I mean, with that being said, do you think that his speech and their reaction proves of how down ideological lines, how different we are just because of their stances? I mean, for their lack of reaction, do you think this is a good visual cue of saying, hey, Trump is at least pro-America, pro-dream? He called American dreamers and saying, hey, here's the chance to do things in America. I believe we are good overall, and I think we have the chance to aspire to be the best they can be. And Democrats didn't react. So, I mean, do you think this is kind of a proving how just different both parties or people, whatever, just see, I guess, what America, the value and just what it represents?
Well, more so, it's an elaboration of the particular types of nuance that the Trump administration is going for. So it would seem that the Trump administration is totally willing to allow people who have come into the country as young kids, who have participated in the country, who are culturally American, to stay, because they are part of who America is. But they're also saying that we need to have the nuance to say that everybody who comes in doesn't then therefore have a free pass to invite other people in that get vetted under a different set of rules. Whereas the nuance which the Democrats have been traditionally trying to put forward is that anytime you vet somebody because you say they could be bad, it makes you a bit of a racist, a bigot, or something else, because of course it always comes down to the color of their skin. And it's like, well, clearly it doesn't. Most of these 800,000 people who would be vetted are coming from Latin American countries. So it's not that. And because they can't tangibly make it that, they're going to yell and scream it as loud as possible, because by yelling louder, they hope to convince some people that, yes, this is something which is based primarily on ethnic delineations. Will it work? Right now, I don't think so, but I am suffering from a source bias. So right now, I look more towards the right-leaning media in the States and also online. So I might be overestimating the degree to which people are waking up and going, hang on, the Democrats are trying to pull a fast one, because I just don't follow their side of the news stories. So I'm not too sure about where this will go, but I do think it's a good way of helping to delineate what our actual position is as the Trump administration versus what the Democrats are claiming it to be.
I'm sorry, you went dead there. Can you repeat that last bit?
So what I see this as is a good way of showing the difference between what the Trump administration is trying to achieve versus what the Democrats are claiming it's trying to achieve. And, hopefully they win that battle. But, sorry, the Republicans, that is. But we'll see.
That's true. That's true. I can see that. Well, hopefully this is, again, I hope that this is a great way to see, with all the, here's my points, and just see, okay, what are your true motives behind things, and now hopefully it's really clear. Now with that being said, what you just said kind of leads to the second thing I was gonna ask or talk about tonight. That goes to the FISA, because, and again, I haven't read or seen this, but I know you have, their Duff, and I know it's actually pretty damaging to the FBI and that kind of deal. But again, I haven't read it, but I know that it's pretty hurtful, and you can, since you've actually read the memo, we give your thoughts there first, Duff.
Well, actually, if you want to play, what we can do, I have it in front of me, is we can read it section by section and see what we think. So I'll read it out loud and pause at that thing and tell me your thoughts there, and we can bounce ideas off of one another. Does that work for you?
Yeah, that sounds probably a bit more of a sounds a bit more intellectually honest there. There you go.
Okay, so according to the memo, House Intelligence Chairman Devin Nunes from California put together this highly controversial, this is CNN saying this, memo released Friday alleging FBI abused its surveillance tools. But if we jump down to what it says, we have as its purpose, this memorandum provides members an update of significant facts relating to the committee, that is the House Intelligence Committee's, ongoing investigation into the Department of Justice and the Federal Bureau of Investigation and their use of the Foreign Intelligence Service Act, which is the acronym FISA, during the 2016 presidential election cycle. Our findings, which are detailed below, raise 1, concerns with the legitimacy and legality of certain DOJ and FBI interactions with Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court, and 2, represent a troubling breakdown of the legal process established to protect American people from abuses related to the ISA process. Now, what this is in reference to is FISA came out of the Watergate scandal in an attempt to prevent powers within the American government from spying on the American people. And what they're saying is happening is that somehow the FBI and others have managed to circumvent this particular protection for the American people. Any thoughts there, AAA?
History can sometimes repeat itself in very bad ways. Is that fair to say?
Okay, so let's get to the investigation update then. On October 21st, 2016, DOJ and FBI sought and received an ISA probable cause order authorizing electronic surveillance on Carter Page. Now, Carter Page was a advisor to the Trump campaign. I think he was an advisor on international relations from the FIC. Page is a U.S. citizen who served as a volunteer advisor to Trump's presidential campaign. Consistent with the requirements under FISA, the application had to be certified by the director or deputy of the FBI. It then required the approval of the Attorney General, Deputy Attorney General, or the Senate-confirmed Assistant Attorney General for National Security Division. Okay, so this is basically a paragraph talking about the vetting process and how you go about getting a FISA warrant put through. So the FBI and the DOJ obtained 1 initial FISA warrant targeting Carter Page and 3 FISA renewals from the FIC, as required by the statute. A FISA order on an American citizen must be renewed by the FISC every 90 days, and each renewal requires a separate finding of probable cause. So here's where it becomes tricky. So every time they renew this, they have to provide evidence that there is something going on. Question is whether that evidence has to be different or developing as the investigation continues. So then Director James Comey signed 3 FISA applications in question on behalf of the FBI, and the Deputy Director Andrew McCabe signed one. Sally Yates, then acting DAGA Dana Boenti, and DAG District Attorney something or other, Rod Rosenstein, each signed one or more FISA application on behalf of the DOJ. Okay. Any thoughts there, AAA?
Well, firstly, wow, just wow. This is I gee, I'm not sure what to say, but that sounds pretty crazy to have all the. So I'm sorry, is it? I guess I'm not sure if I misheard you. The had a different or a strenuous vetting process, or did I mishear you?
So the vetting process is that you can renew these every 90 days. And the thing is, it requires that you have evidence to keep on renewing. So the question which comes out of this is, what evidence can you use? And can you use the same evidence over and over and over again? So let's say somebody is suspected of robbing a bank. So you're following them, and then the thing runs out, and you say they're still suspected of robbing the bank. And then the judge asks, well, have you found any more information? And they go, well, no. It's like, well, can you still use that as probable cause? And I would assume yes, to a certain degree. But what happens if you keep on using exactly the same evidence over and over and over again with no change in the case? I think that poses a bit of a problem.
Yeah, that's true. I guess well, I guess then that leads to the question of what do they qualify as? How different does it need to be? Is it okay? We saw him in this way, and then we ended the investigation, and then they met with someone else that could potentially be in the same, I don't know, band of people and stuff. So I guess that kind of depends on the circumstance. I'm guessing I'm guessing they don't give much information towards what's different evidence at that point.
Not yet, and that's something we're going to get to. So, continuing on. Due to the sensitive nature of foreign intelligence activity, FISA submissions, including renewals before the FISA, are classified. As such, the public's confidence in the integrity of the FISA process depends on the court's ability to hold the government to the highest standard, particularly as it relates to surveillance of American citizens. However, the rigor in protecting the rights of Americans, which is reinforced by 90-day renewals of surveillance orders, is necessarily dependent on the government's production to the court of all material and relevant facts. This should include information potentially favorable to the target of the FISA application that is known by the government. In the case of Carter Page, the government had at least 4 independent opportunities before the FSIC to accurately provide accounting of relevant facts. However, our findings indicate that, as described below, material and relevant information was omitted. Now, this gets back to what I was saying earlier. If you want to keep on renewing a FISA application, you do need to show that the case is ongoing and that developments are happening within it. And what is being said here is those developments should include things which the person who is being observed is doing. So imagine they have done nothing wrong in the last 90 days. You should actually mention that they have done nothing wrong in those 90 days. And it would appear that in this instance, any evidence contrary was omitted by the applicants for the FISA surveillance warrants.
Wow. Okay. Huh. I'm wondering. I assume this is pretty much an ongoing occurrence that it was omitted.
Now, we'll find out. They'll explain. First point, the dossier compiled by Christopher Steele, which has been called the Steele dossier on behalf of the Democratic National Committee and Hillary Clinton campaign, formed an essential part of the Carter-Page FISA application. Steele was a longtime FBI source who was paid over $160,000 by the DNC and Clinton campaign via the law firm Perkins and Coy and research firm Fusion GPS to obtain derogatory information on Donald Trump's ties to Russia. Ooh, so that's juicy. So what they were using for at least some of the applications is a document compiled by political adversaries. That is not unheard of, but that does seem fishy.
Wow, okay. I guess like at this point I can't say I'm surprised, but okay.
So, A, neither the initial application in October 2016 nor any of the renewals disclose or reference the role of the DNC, Clinton campaign, or any party campaign funding in Steele's efforts, even though the political origins of the Steele dossier were made known to senior FBI officials. Now, here's the tricky bit here. So that's not abnormal. For the FBI not to disclose all of their sources is pretty much standard practice, because if they were disclosing it all the time, if the FISA court was compromised, then technically an investigation could be compromised. What seems to make this an issue, though, is the FBI knew that it wasn't as if they had multiple sources. They had one source and no more sources. So it was as if they were using the same thing over and over and over again, and not admitting to the courts that that's what they were doing.
Huh. That's sounds like it's a really bad I don't know. Sounds like it's a really bad journalist at that point. Is that fair to say at this point?
Well, and this is where, of course, people are starting to say, collusion, 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 and potentially so, because I think, was it 2 days ago, they keep on uncovering more and more of the cell records which were lost. And those two particular FBI agents, who are now a married couple, appear to have talked about things which look like collusion as well. But according to the dossier, actually, according to the memo, this initial FISA application notes that Steele was working for a named U.S. person, but does not name Fusion GPS and Principal Glenn Simpson, who was paid by a U.S. law firm, this is Perkins Coy, representing the DNC, even though it was known by the DOJ at the time that political actors were involved with the Steele dossier. The application does not mention Steele was ultimately working on behalf of and paid by the DNC and Clinton campaign, or that the FBI was separately authorized payment to Steele for the same information. Ooh, that's juicy. So essentially, a corporation can get the FBI to pursue leads on its own, because, of course, corporations in the States are considered people. Scary.
Isn't that kind of how the representatives in Congress were quote unquote were okay-ish with Obamacare because that only affected quote unquote companies, and they called themselves companies, so they kind of got out of that. Wasn't that a huge deal back in the day?
Maybe, but I couldn't actually say. The trickier thing here is that if you give corporations rights as citizens, it means that an entity that can have a vested international interest can basically get the FBI to do what it would like it to do. And that's tricky, because it might be based in America, but that doesn't mean that the corporate entity is operating with America's best mind and interest.
Right. Okay, I see what you're saying.
Yeah. Should we continue there, AAA?
We probably should move on to this, but yeah, it's getting pretty juicy.
Okay. Okay, so the Carter-Page FISA application also cited extensively a September 23rd, 2016 Yahoo News article by a guy named Michael Isikoff, which focused on Page's July 2016 trip to Moscow. This article does not corroborate the Steele dossier because it is derived from information leaked by Steele himself to Yahoo News. The Page FISA application incorrectly assesses that Steele did not directly provide information to Yahoo News. Steele has admitted in British court filings that he met with Yahoo News and several other outlets in September 2016 at the direction of Fusion GPS. Perkins Coie was aware of Steele's initial media contacts because they hosted at least one meeting in Washington, D.C. in 2016 with Steele and Fusion GPS, where this matter was discussed. Wow, sounds like a James Bond film.
Well, hey, they've already been talking. Well, maybe this will promote the next Bond film, because I don't know how much you've heard about that, but slight side note, I know they're trying to go and decide if they want to make the main actor continue to be Daniel Craig or get someone else new there, but I don't know. Can you see the parodies happening right now?
Oh, yeah. I have a feeling Steven Crowder and the like will be using a lot of this to produce content for months to come. But what this does seem to imply is that this dossier was compiled by someone who is perfectly willing to leak on their own accord, and to lie about leaking, and that there are elements, or at least arguably elements, within the FBI, potentially the DNC, that are okay with that, provided they have political gain. Now, that's not really a smoking gun, because I'm pretty sure there'd be people on all sides of the political aisles that would be willing to do the same thing. It's just that here we have someone who's definitively been caught.
Yeah, I could say, yeah, that sounds about right. I mean, this is kind of just as you put it. There's now evidence of, hey, here's what we suspect that has happened. Okay, now we can actually see the smoking gun. So where there was smoke, okay, hey, there's the fire. I can point to it now. Congratulations there. So it's this is pretty crazy. So I mean, I don't know. At this point, can it get much worse? I guess is the new question.
Maybe. We only have 5 paragraphs left, so let's see where it goes.
Let's keep going.
So Steele was suspended and then terminated as an FBI source for what the FBI defines as the most serious of violations: an unauthorized disclosure to the media of his relationship with the FBI in October 30th, 2016. Mother Jones article by David Korn. Steele should have been terminated for his previous undisclosed contacts with Yahoo and other outlets in September, before the Page application was submitted to the FSC in October, but Steele improperly concealed from and lied to the FBI about those contacts. Now, here's where you'd be like, but shouldn't the FBI actually be keeping tabs on their own informants? And it would appear that they either weren't, or they weren't disclosing what they knew about what was going on.
Getting pretty shady here.
Sorry, go ahead there, Triple A.
This is getting pretty shady here.
Oh, let's see if the shade continues. Steele's numerous encounters with the media violated the cardinal rule of source handling, maintaining confidentiality, and demonstrated that Steele had become less than reliable source for the FBI. Before and after Steele was terminated as a source, he maintained contact with the DOJ via then Associate Deputy Attorney General Bruce Orr, a senior DOJ official who worked closely with Deputy Attorneys General Yates and later Rosenstein. Shortly after the election, the FBI began interviewing or documenting his communications with Steele. For example, in September 2016, Steele admitted to Orr his feelings against then-candidate Trump when Steele said he was desperate that Donald Trump not get elected and was passionate about him not being president. This clear evidence of Steele's bias was recorded by Orr at the first time and subsequently in official FBI files, but is not reflected in any of the Page FISA applications. Okay, that seems like a bit of a thing to focus on. So they used a document produced by someone who was funded by a political party that was anti-Republican party and anti-Trump, and he himself had, let's say, party line views on who should be running the United States. That seems like something worth delving more into, at least from the FBI's perspective, you'd think.
This is, yeah, I didn't think it could juice you, but wow, that's I don't know if there's any real coming back from this one. You know what I mean?
Well, here's the thing, though. if you're going to get somebody to create a document about someone else, generally you need to find someone who's antagonistic towards that person. So that's not unexpected. And the fact that that person has made a document which was antagonistic towards that group is not surprising. The surprising thing here is that the FBI was not saying, look, we have one source and it appears to be our only source for these applications. That's not to say that Page, in any way, shape, or form, may not have been worth investigating prior to that, but rather, as we said earlier, they seem to have been using exactly the same evidence without any corroborating or broader spectrum research being done. So it's as if they just kept on sending in the same application, and the court was like, okay, okay, okay. And you would hope that the court would actually have standards where they would demand more evidence to try and more evidence to give them the power to keep on renewing. Because if they're not demanding more evidence, then essentially you can be surveilled indefinitely forever. And that would seem to be a bit of a waste of resources.
I mean, at this rate, so it's almost sounds with that point being in mind, it just that our the FBI got really, really lazy. Is that maybe a fair point?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what we're seeing is perhaps that there are some fail safes that should have been in place that weren't being acted upon. And maybe those fail safes are actually in place and they were just choosing not to use them. But here comes the collusion aspect of it. So during the
Oh
same period,
my.
Orr's wife was employed by Fusion GPS to assist in the cultivation of opposition research on Trump. So here we might have a conflict of interest because you have a member of the DOJ and his wife being hired by a research firm that is intentionally trying to get evidence of wrongdoing on behalf of political actors within the United States. So that seems fishy. Was employed by GPS to assist the cultivation of research on Trump, or later provided the FBI with all of his wife's opposition research paid for by the DNC and Clinton campaigns via Fusion GPS. The Orr's relationship with Steele and Fusion GPS was inexplicably concealed from the FIC.
Okay. Oh, God.
Now, according to the head of the FBI's Counterintelligence Division, Assistant Director Bill Priestap's corroboration of the Steele dossier was in its infancy at the time of the initial Page FISA application. So here's something which Ben Shapiro pointed out as well. There was already going to be an investigation into Carter Page, but whatever they were using for that initial application and what they used for subsequent applications appears to have been different. So after Steele was terminated, a source validation report conducted by an independent unit within the FBI assessed Steele's reporting as only minimally corroborated. Yet in early January 2017, Director Comey briefed President-elect Trump on a summary of the Steele dossier, even though it was, according to his June 2017 testimony, salacious and unverified, while the FISA application relied on Steele's past records of credible reporting on other unrelated matters. It ignored or concealed his anti-Trump financial and ideological motivations. Furthermore, Deputy Director McCabe testified before the committee in December 2017 that no surveillance warrant could have been sought from the FIC without the Steele dossier information. Okay. Oh, what are your thoughts on that, AAA?
I mean, the one thing I will say is, I remember listening to Ben's show a few days ago and him saying that, him commenting on everyone saying, this is the worst thing in the world. Oh my God, this is, Armageddon for the Democrats. And he's kind of like, guys, we don't know what the memo says. Let's just take a breather, calm down, and hope, and just let's see. It sounds like, again, I don't think this is, hey, here's proof of the dead bodies of Democrats, and here's the money laundering, here's all the mobsters and corruption. But I think it does make a great point to saying, this is proof of, hey, this is a giant problem, and we haven't really done much to solve it. So, maybe again, it shines a light on the laziness, the ineptitude, and the inconsistency of, I guess, laws weren't being followed, or I guess weren't being implemented, basically. But I mean, hey, this is the first step at least to proving, maybe we need to take a closer look into how our justice system is working. Is that maybe your take too, potentially?
Possibly. I'll get to that in just a sec there, Triple. I'll just finish the memo.
Oh, I'm sorry that you're
Uh,
done. Yeah, go for it.
Last
Okay.
paragraph.
All
The
right, all
Page
right.
FISA application also mentions information regarding fellow Trump campaign advisor George Padadopoulos, but there is no evidence of any cooperation or conspiracy between Page and Padadopoulos. The Padadopoulos information triggered the opening of an FBI counterintelligence investigation in late July 2016 by FBI agent Pete Strzok. Strzok was reassigned by a special counsel office to FBI Human Resources for improper text messages with his mistress, FBI attorney Lisa Page, known in relation to Carter Page, where they both demonstrated a clear bias against Trump and in favor of Clinton, whom Strzok also investigated. The Strzok-Lisa Page texts also reflect extensive discussions about investigation, orchestrating leaks to the media, and include a meeting with Deputy Director McCabe to discuss the insurance policy against President Trump's election. Okay, so what I would say about that is this, essentially. This memo is still a bit of a question mark because it's a summary of what we have, or what the Republicans have acquired, but even they admit that it doesn't contain everything because there is still stuff from the FBI, which both the Republicans, the Democrats, and the FBI agreed should not appear in this document because it might hurt ongoing investigations. So this is a document that has actually had a significant piece of it taken out, and all sides agreed that it was for a good reason. But what it does highlight is that, unsurprisingly, FBI agents and FBI members and leaders of the FBI are people like everybody else, and they have political affiliations. The problem is that they seem, in this case, to have let their political leanings get in front of their better judgment so that they are not nonpartisan in how they are acting as the Federal Intelligence Bureau of the United States, which is a real problem. The FBI will never be completely objective, but it really should try to eliminate as much subjectivity within its investigations and how it conducts itself as possible. So there does seem to be grounds for reassessing how the FBI handles its day-to-day affairs and how it reins in some of the political biases of its members.
Yeah, this is a pretty. I mean, I'm glad that, and that's the scary part too. You mentioned that this is not the full-fledged information that we that there even is. But I mean, I think that just based on what you've read today, it sounds as though, I mean, the few points again, we kind of have. It was alluded to that, hey, there might be some problems. It sounds like now it's definitely we're proving that here is clear conflict of interest and not a lot of vetting slash resources, or uh, not many points to be taken into account of, we only have one side of the story from one source, so that's pretty bad to hear. And I don't know, hopefully, maybe eventually we can hear some more news about the information that had been omitted from this dossier, and potentially you find out a little bit more. But I think, I don't know, is that do you think that this is at least a start potentially to maybe, hey, let's stop being lazy? Is that fair to say?
Yeah, no, I would say essentially what this is probably the opening rounds in some serious discussions about what the FBI should and shouldn't do, and how it treats its evidence with which it pursues FISA applications. And so it might be that the FISA court will actually ask, how many sources are you actually giving us? And require the FBI to give them, let's say, redacted documents which have names and pertinent information taken out, but you can clearly see that there are multiple streams of evidence that are going on, and it's not just a singular piece of evidence that has been compiled by someone who may or may not have a political bone to pick. So there could be a lot of good that comes out of this actually. And one thing which I would also say is that this is evidence of the system, although dealing with the problem, actually dealing with the problem the way it should. So the new DOJ essentially goes to the FBI and says, "Hey, we have concerns that you're withholding information. We're going to subpoena you for that information." And the FBI said, "We will give it to you." The bigger problem would have been they go to the FBI and the FBI says, "What information? We have no information." And so the government would, in fact, be at war with parts of itself. And that's not the case. What we do have here is a intelligence community which may have gotten out of hand. And now we have an opportunity to bring it back into line with what it might have, or what it ought to have been, which is more nonpartisan in its operations in general. But yeah,
Well,
what's your
hopefully
takeaway,
they can
Kublai?
do. I mean, I agree. I think hopefully from this we can see that hey, there is definitely bias, at the very least, and some. I mean, definitely some. Again, I say laziness on the part of vetting not just the people, but just the process of information. I mean, giving one source, I mean, geez, that's ridiculous. That's I don't think you can. I think you have to give more than one source in papers in elementary school now just to pass a class. So that's just ridiculous overall in general. But yeah, hopefully this is the first step in saying, hey, I'm not saying that I agree with everything that's been going on with the Trump, and I'm not saying he's the Mr. Squeaky Clean by any means. But let's this sounds like hard proof to say, hey, we've gone down this extreme for too long and things haven't gotten done, and now we can see that it's not worthwhile to just use one source, use these people, and maybe we've just been wasting time for a little while. So hopefully we get back to having, I don't know, standards, which I mean, I want to say go back to common sense, but as more and more I see, that's becoming less common, so it's almost not even can't use that phrase anymore. But yeah, I hope this is a start, and I hope that potentially later on we can find more information on all of the, or I'm sorry, more information that had been omitted is released sooner, and maybe this can, I don't know, want to say shut people up, but kind of say maybe this can be the first step to say, hey, you know what, you've been saying a lot for a while. Let's reevaluate, freak out correctly or not at all potentially, and move things in the right direction. So, yeah, I hope this is a good antidote to all that. So. And I would imagine you would agree there, Duff, that this was definitely something that we needed to be released.
Yeah, and like I think the Democrats' contention that this somehow breaks the American Constitution, releasing information to the public which is pertinent to knowing what's going on in the government, um, it makes some sense, but at the same time, only if you're saying that it's clearly not politically motivated to keep this out of the public eye. So to release it, it's definitely a political play. To not release it would have been a political play. But I would rather know that there's something going on in a way that doesn't, let's say, jeopardize the intelligence community as a whole, than to continue to remain completely ignorant and actually have the conspiracy theorists just having a field day with this thing. So what was released in the form which it was released, I think, is probably one of the best outcomes for both sides, and hopefully will lead to more information that leads to a positive outcome. And I don't know what that outcome will be, but this is an example of the process working correctly, and that the more information the public has, the more informed we can be about our decision making and how we decide to construe what various political agencies are telling us.
Yeah, that's fair. Well, again, I hope this is the beginning of at least maybe people paying more attention and not just saying, okay, well, I've heard the media saying this thing and this is how it's going to be, and hopefully people kind of have the broader idea of not that they're necessarily been lied to, but just the hey, things aren't as squeaky clean as you think they are, and let's just get some a reality check, if you will. So hopefully now we can kind of just be more responsible with ourselves and make sure we're not being led down one path and go, hey, here's everything, and maybe it's not. We need to just be more open minded and realize everything's not as not that everything is as it seems. So anyway, I just looked at the clock. Actually, I've got to actually head out here in a little bit. But Duff, I appreciate you reading the memo because that was, of course, the best way to view the information is to just read aloud and to gather our thoughts over that overall. So thank you for that. And any last thoughts from you there, Duff?
We live in interesting times, and I love it.
That's very true. Well, thank you guys for listening to us, and we will see you guys next time. But yeah, all right, say goodbye there, Duff. We'll see you guys next time.
Have a good weekend, folks.